He's been loyal to his sons, to his country, to his employees, and to his church. Well, I'm sure now that the press is going to tell you he isn't perfect. But my friends, for the past 4 years, we've tried the one that the press thought was perfect, and that hasn't worked out all that well for us. That's why tonight I tell you, we can do better.
Former GOP presidential candidate and current Fox News host Governor Mike Huckabee addressing the Republican convention this week, reminding America of the media role in the 2008 election. So when you think back to the coverage of 2008 and looking forward to the Democratic convention this coming week, Jim, has anything changed?
Oh, I think the media are still being the media. The MRC, Rich Noyes, did a
Media Research
Center, yes, sir, had a study of all the media coverage since 1988, and every 4 years it showed what the coverage looks like, and it's just a quadrennium of leading questions, leading things. Don't you think Republicans have to apologize for being racist, whatever? And just so in case anybody thought the trend might change, Thursday's New York Times chose to use this picture of Paul Ryan. Now that's Paul Ryan down there, little tiny guy, and these black figures behind them are unidentified, presumably stagehands or colleagues.
It's a nice picture of the backdrop.
Pardon?
It's a nice picture of the backdrop.
Looks like the flames of hell.
I think, however, if you look at the color and the blackness and so on, and the little tiny Ryan there, I think, as I wasn't the first observer to say, it looks like Ryan and Satan and his colleagues here. That's the New York Times. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, this is worth 1,000,000.
All right. So, Judy, Governor Romney gave his big speech. A lot of folks in the media said, oh, it was short on specifics. But when you look back to the candidate Obama speech from 2008 about hope and change, there wasn't a lot of specific information in there either.
Exactly. I think Governor Romney figured out that whatever the president did clearly worked, and that he was going to emulate that by giving absolutely no specifics. So even though we know that Governor Romney is unhappy with the fact that Iran continues to develop nuclear capability, we don't know what he would do differently from President Obama to stop Iran from doing that. I mean, I think that eventually, someone will ask the Republicans, what do you mean specifically? But it hasn't happened yet, and it certainly didn't happen during a convention.
Well, should these presidential candidates be pressed to give us more specifics?
Of course they should. They also be called on there.
We don't know what President Obama wants to do in the next 4 years.
Sure we do. We've had him for 4 years. He's been much more specific than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney does interview after interview. Nobody presses him on, well, how are you going to, he wants to cut everything to 20% of the GDP. He wants to cut taxes for the rich. He wants to raise military spending. And he said last night, what night was it, Thursday night? That he said that he was going to actually not increase taxes for the middle class. That is physically impossible. How is he going to do all that and solve the budget deficit problem? Nobody has pressed him on this. The media has not done its job, nor have they held these people accountable for their lies, the constant lies about Barack Obama, the constant lies about what their plan is. They have not been held accountable.
You sound offended.
I am offended.
Well, are the media going to do the same thing at the Democratic convention?
Oh, no. Here's what the media are going to do at the Democratic convention. They're not going to apply the same standard to Democrats, please, as they do to Republicans. So if they did, this is what it would look like. The media would be asking the Democratic leaders, why don't you have any pro-life, pro-traditional marriage, smaller government, lower taxes people in your party? It is all monochromatic ideologically among Democrats. But when it's Republicans, they always say, we need to hear more from groups, blacks, African Americans, women. So when the Republicans get those people up on the stage, Suzanne Martinez, Marco Rubio, and others, they say, well, they're just tokens. They don't really represent the party. So it's a complete double standard, and you're never going to hear the same questions asked of Democrats as you do of Republicans.
You're talking about race and ethnicity versus ideology. They're two very different things.
Well, not to the media, they're not.
Well,
because if you're a black conservative, then you've gone off, to mix a metaphor, the reservation.
Gee, I wonder why black conservatives aren't too happy about the Republican Party. I wonder why.
I'm sure
related to that, though, you read a lot in the media about how Mitt Romney is too robotic and he doesn't seem to have a core and that kind of thing. And yet they bring out this couple, Ted and Pat Oprowski, I think is how their name is pronounced, who have this heartrending story about how he came to visit their dying son, became good friends with him, helped write his will and so forth, and it got essentially not any coverage in the media.
Right, that wasn't a heart-rending moment for the family, and I think it spoke volumes about who the real Mitt Romney is, and it doesn't seem to have gotten any coverage because what the media really are doing, and I think Alan kind of prefigured it, is you're seeing the meme come out on the liberal press critics, and I'm thinking, for example, of Jim Fallows at The Atlantic, or Jay Rosen at NYU, or a guy named Dan Conover at a blog called Zark.com, all saying, hey, press, get tougher on the Republicans, hashtag Ryan Lyon, which is what Keith Olbermann is putting out.
The Weekly Standard saying, why didn't Romney even mention the fact that we have 28,000 troops or 48,000 troops in a war right now? He never even acknowledged that. This is Bill Kristol, who couldn't believe that what was lacking from Romney.
For every Bill Kristol pounding the media from the right, there'll be 100 pounding the media from the left.
I want to name all 100 if we possibly.
Well, Chris Matthews accused Reince Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, of race baiting. The LA Times had this headline: Republican National Convention puts a brown face on a white party. Is this race baiting by the media?
Well, I was struck by the coverage on NBC and MSNBC of how obviously, unabashedly biased it was. I mean, NBC now has a point of view, and that clearly came out in this coverage, whether it was Tom Brokaw speaking about a backward-looking speech about a man who is less inclusive than his father, to Chris Matthews, who said things that even made Joe Scarborough and Ms. Brzezinski uncomfortable on Morning Joe. So I think now if that's what you want, you know where to look.
Chris Matthews is an opinion host. That's what he does.
Exactly.
He gives opinions for
Yes, but they're supposed to have straight coverage of a convention, and it was hard to find that on NBC.
And then there was David Chalian, the now former head of Yahoo News, Washington Bureau, who was overheard on an ABC webcast saying the Romneys are happy to have a party as black people while black people drown, referring to the hurricane hitting the West Coast. Now, the Gulf Coast. He got fired for that, but this is a guy who has been political director for ABC News, was political director for the PBS NewsHour, has a long history in the media.
He got fired not for what he said, but because he let the cat out of the bag. That was his problem, because that's how a lot of them think. Look, there's no difference, Alan, between an African-American liberal, Hispanic liberal, a female liberal. They're all liberals. But the left-wing media tries to draw this distinction that all blacks, all Hispanics, and virtually all women ought to be liberal, or if they're not, they are somehow...
He got fired. They did the right thing. They let the guy go, and if he didn't get fired, you'd be screaming bloody murder that he wasn't fired.
I actually think, look, Chalian got a bad deal. I don't think they should have fired him. And making a mistake on a hot mic, we've all
agree with that.
And so I think it's unfortunate. They should have suspended him, punished him, and he's certainly a useful illustration. What's more illustrative of ABC's mindset, though, is the fact, as MRC also pointed out, during the speech by Susana Martinez, Hispanic governor of New Mexico, ABC cut away to Jorge Ramos, a Hispanic broadcaster who just blasted away at Republicans for not being inclusive.
All right. Up next on News Watch.